Soo-jin Kim had always believed in fairy tales. At 20, she possessed the kind of innocent beauty that made strangers turn their heads on Seoul's busy streets. Her long black hair caught the light like silk, and her eyes held a warmth that spoke of dreams yet to be fulfilled. She worked at a small coffee shop in Gangnam, serving lattes to businessmen who barely acknowledged her existence. The pay was modest, but it helped support her ailing grandmother in Busan. Every morning she would arrive early, tying her apron with the same hopeful smile that had carried her through years of struggle. It was on a rainy Tuesday morning that Park Min-ho first walked into her life. He was impossible to ignore. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and despite being 52, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who owned the world. What Soo-jin didn't know was that Min-ho had been watching her for weeks. As the CEO of Park Industries, one of Korea's largest conglomerates, he was accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he wanted her. Their first interaction seemed spontaneous. He ordered a simple Americano, but when she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. He smiled, a practiced expression that had charmed board members and business partners for decades. "You have beautiful hands," he said softly, his voice carrying just the right amount of warmth. Soo-jin blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She had no idea that this moment had been orchestrated, that Min-ho had studied her routines, her preferences, even her financial struggles. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a project. Over the following weeks, he became a regular customer, always requesting her service, always leaving generous tips. He learned her schedule, her dreams of opening her own bakery, her devotion to her grandmother. Each conversation was a carefully placed stone in the foundation of his plan. Chapter 2. The courtship begins. Min-ho's pursuit of Soo-jin was methodical and relentless. He appeared at the coffee shop every day at exactly 9:15 a.m., ordering the same Americano and engaging her in conversations that felt natural but were anything but spontaneous. He had done his research thoroughly. Through private investigators, he knew about her family's debt, her grandmother's medical bills, and her secret dream of studying pastry arts in France. Every word he spoke was designed to build trust and dependency. "You seem tired today," he observed one morning, noting the dark circles under her eyes. Soo-jin forced a smile. "Just a long night. My grandmother had to go to the hospital again." Min-ho's expression softened with practiced concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. Medical bills can be overwhelming." She nodded, surprised by his understanding. Most customers never bothered to ask about her life. "If you ever need help," he continued, "I know some excellent doctors. Sometimes it's not about money. It's about knowing the right people." The offer was perfectly timed, perfectly delivered. Not pushy enough to seem suspicious, but generous enough to plant seeds of gratitude. Within a month, their coffee shop conversations had evolved into lunch meetings. Min-ho would arrive in his black Mercedes, dressed down in casual clothes that still screamed wealth. He took her to expensive restaurants where she felt out of place, but his gentle manner put her at ease. He listened to her stories about growing up poor, about her parents' death in a car accident when she was 16, about her dreams that seemed impossibly far away. With each revelation, he filed away another piece of information to use later. "You're special, Soo-jin," he told her one evening as they walked along the Han River. "Most people your age only think about themselves, but you sacrifice everything for your grandmother." She looked up at him, her heart fluttering. No one had ever called her special before. What she didn't see was the calculating look in his eyes, the satisfaction of a hunter who knew his prey was already caught. Chapter 3. The Proposal. 3 months after their first meeting, Min-ho proposed. The setting was perfect, a private rooftop restaurant overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, with a string quartet playing softly in the background. Soo-jin wore a simple black dress he had bought her, claiming she deserved beautiful things. The ring was spectacular, a 5-carat diamond that caught the city lights like captured stars. But more impressive than the ring was Min-ho's speech, delivered with the sincerity of a man who had practiced every word. "Soo-jin," he began, taking her hands in his, These past months have shown me what I've been missing in my life. You've brought light into a world I thought was complete." She stared at him in shock. They had been dating, yes, but marriage seemed so sudden, so overwhelming. "I know there's an age difference," he continued, reading her hesitation perfectly. "I know people will talk, but I also know that what we have is real." The word real hit her like a physical blow. Nothing about their relationship was real, but Soo-jin had no way of knowing that. To her, his attention felt like a miracle. "I can take care of you," he pressed on. "Your grandmother's medical bills, your dreams of studying abroad, I can make all of that happen, but more than that, I want to make you happy." Tears filled her eyes. The offer was everything she had ever dreamed of, wrapped in the promise of love from a man who seemed to genuinely care about her. "Yes," she whispered, not seeing the flash of triumph in his eyes. The engagement ring slid onto her finger like a shackle, beautiful and binding. Min-ho kissed her gently, tasting victory. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, he made a phone call to his assistant. "The wedding is in 6 weeks," he said simply. "Make sure everything is perfect." He had won, just as he always did. Soo-jin Kim would soon become Soo-jin Park, and his collection would be complete. Chapter 4. The Wedding Day. The wedding was a spectacle that dominated Korean society pages. Held at the Grand Hyatt Seoul, it was attended by politicians, celebrities, and business leaders who came more to network than to celebrate love. Soo-jin felt like she was floating through a dream. Her wedding dress, custom-made by a famous designer, cost more than most people's cars. The ceremony was flawless, orchestrated by the country's top wedding planner. But as she walked down the aisle, surrounded by hundreds of strangers, a cold realization began to settle in her chest. She recognized almost no one in the crowd. These weren't friends or family. They were Min-ho's business associates, people who saw her as an accessory to his success. Her grandmother sat in the front row, looking overwhelmed in her new dress. She was the only familiar face in a sea of polite strangers. Min-ho waited at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo. When their eyes met, he smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. But something felt different now, something she couldn't quite name. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. They exchanged vows that had been written by a professional speechwriter, promising love and devotion in words that felt hollow in her mouth. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Min-ho kissed her with practiced passion. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, and Soo-jin felt a strange disconnection from her own life. The reception was equally grand. She sat at the head table, smiling and nodding, as endless streams of guests offered congratulations that felt more like business transactions. "You're so lucky," whispered the wife of a prominent politician. "Min-ho is one of the most eligible bachelors in Korea." "Was," corrected another woman with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Now he's all yours." The words carried an undertone that made Soo-jin uncomfortable, but she couldn't understand why. As the evening wore on, she began to notice things. The way Min-ho's hand on her back felt possessive rather than loving. The way his business partners looked at her, not with respect, but with something closer to pity. By the time they left for their honeymoon suite, Soo-jin felt like she was suffocating in her beautiful dress. Chapter 5. The Honeymoon Revelation. Their honeymoon in Jeju Island should have been magical. The resort was exclusive, their suite overlooked pristine beaches, and every detail had been arranged to perfection. But from the moment they arrived, Soo-jin felt the walls of her new life closing in. Min-ho was different now. The gentle, attentive man who had courted her had been replaced by someone colder, more controlling. He decided what they would eat, where they would go, even what she would wear. "The blue dress," he said on their second morning, laying out clothes for her. "It brings out your eyes. I thought I might wear the yellow one today," she ventured. His smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "The blue one is more appropriate." It was a small thing, but it felt significant. She found herself changing into the blue dress without further protest. Their conversations, once flowing and natural, now felt stilted. Min-ho seemed more interested in his phone than in her, taking business calls even during their romantic dinners. On their third night, she discovered something that shattered her remaining illusions. While Min-ho showered, his phone buzzed with a message. Thinking it might be important, she glanced at the screen. The message was from his assistant. "The Kim girl is working out perfectly. The board is impressed with your choice. Young, beautiful, and grateful. Exactly what we discussed." Soo-jin's hands trembled as she read the words. The Kim girl. Not his wife, not even her name. Just a description, like she was a product that had been successfully acquired. She scrolled up through the message history, her heart breaking with each revelation. There were discussions about her suitability, her background check, even her breeding potential. The investigators' reports detailed her entire life, her vulnerabilities, her desperate need for financial security. The coffee shop meetings, the romantic dinners, the proposal, all of it had been calculated, planned, executed like a business merger. When Min-ho emerged from the bathroom, he found her sitting on the bed, his phone in her hands. "Interesting reading?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "You bought me," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I invested in you," he corrected, sitting down beside her. "There's a difference." The casual cruelty of his response hit her like a physical blow. This was her husband, the man she had promised to love and honor just days ago. Chapter 6. The Gilded Cage. Returning to Seoul, Soo-jin found herself installed in Min-ho's penthouse like a beautiful ornament. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, art worth more than most people's homes. But it felt like a museum, cold and untouchable. Min-ho's routine became her routine. He left for work at 7, returned at 8, and expected her to be perfectly dressed and waiting. Dinner was served by his housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, who treated Soo-jin with polite distance. "Mr. Park prefers his meals at exactly 8:30, Mrs. Choi informed her. "He doesn't like to wait." Soo-jin nodded, feeling like a child being given instructions. Everything in the apartment had its place, its purpose, its schedule, including her. She was given a credit card with no limit, but found that every purchase was monitored. When she bought books, Min-ho commented on her intellectual development. When she bought clothes, he critiqued her choices. "You're representing me now," he reminded her when she selected a dress he deemed too casual. "Everything you do reflects on my reputation." Her grandmother's medical bills were paid, as promised. The best doctors, the finest treatments, a private room with round-the-clock care. But when Soo-jin wanted to visit, Min-ho's schedule took precedence. "The charity gala is tonight," he would say. "Your grandmother will understand." She began to realize that her grandmother's care was another chain binding her to this life. Min-ho had made himself indispensable, the source of everything that mattered to her. Her old friends from the coffee shop tried to stay in touch, but their worlds had become incompatible. They couldn't afford the restaurants Min-ho frequented, and he made it clear that their company was beneath his wife's new status. Slowly, systematically, he isolated her from everyone and everything that had once given her life meaning. The only time she felt truly alone was in the evenings when Min-ho worked late. She would stand by the windows, looking down at the city lights, feeling like a prisoner in a tower made of glass and gold. Sometimes she caught her reflection in those windows and barely recognized herself. The girl who had served coffee with dreams in her eyes was gone, replaced by a perfectly groomed stranger. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. 6 months into their marriage, Soo-jin's carefully constructed world began to crack. It started with small things, forgotten conversations, misplaced items, a growing sense that she was losing herself piece by piece. Min-ho's control had become absolute. He monitored her phone calls, approved her social engagements, even selected the books she read. When she expressed interest in taking cooking classes, he hired a private chef to teach her instead. "It's more efficient," he explained, "and more appropriate for someone in your position." Everything was about efficiency, appropriateness, maintaining the image he had crafted for their marriage. She was his perfect wife on paper, young, beautiful, devoted, but she felt like she was disappearing. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Soo-jin had spent the day at another charity luncheon, smiling and making small talk with women who treated her like an interesting curiosity. She returned home exhausted, wanting nothing more than to call her grandmother. But when she reached for her phone, she discovered that Min-ho had changed her passcode. "I noticed you've been spending too much time on social media," he said when she confronted him. "It's not healthy. You changed my passcode without telling me?" "I'm protecting you from yourself," he replied, not looking up from his laptop. "You're too trusting, too naive. People will take advantage of that." The irony was devastating. The man lecturing her about being taken advantage of had manipulated her into marriage, isolated her from her support system, and turned her into a trophy wife. "I want to see my grandmother," she said quietly. "This weekend, we have the corporate retreat. I want to see her now." Min-ho finally looked up, his expression cold. "That's not possible." "She's dying," Soo-jin said, her voice breaking. "The doctor said she has weeks, maybe days. I need to be with her." "The retreat is important for my business. You'll see her when it's convenient." Something inside Soo-jin snapped. "Convenient for who? For you? For your image? For your business?" "For our life together," he said firmly. "Everything I do is for us." "No," she said, standing up. "Everything you do is for you. I'm just another acquisition." The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and true. Chapter 8. The Escape Attempt. That night, while Min-ho slept, Soo-jin made her decision. She couldn't live like this anymore. Controlled, monitored, reduced to an ornament in someone else's life. Her grandmother was dying, and she was trapped in a penthouse, playing the role of the perfect wife. She packed a small bag with essentials, careful not to wake Min-ho. Her hands shook as she gathered her few remaining personal items. Photos of her parents, her grandmother's ring, the journal she had kept hidden. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt endless. Every floor that passed increased her heart rate, her fear that Min-ho would discover her absence and stop her. But when the doors opened, she found herself face to face with Min-ho's driver, Mr. Park. "Mrs. Park," he said, clearly surprised. "Mr. Park didn't mention you had an appointment." "I need to see my grandmother," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's an emergency." Mr. Park hesitated. He had been instructed never to take her anywhere without Min-ho's explicit permission. "Please," Soo-jin begged. "She's dying. I just need a few hours." Something in her desperation must have moved him, because he nodded and opened the car door. The drive to Busan took 3 hours. Soo-jin spent them staring out the window, watching Seoul disappear behind them. With each mile, she felt like she could breathe a little easier. Her grandmother's hospital room was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of machines. The old woman looked so small in the bed, so fragile. But when she saw Soo-jin, her eyes brightened. "My beautiful granddaughter," she whispered. "You came?" Soo-jin took her hand, feeling the papery skin, the weak pulse. "I'm here, grandmother. I'm here." They talked for hours, about memories, about love, about the choices that had led them to this moment. Her grandmother was wise enough not to ask about the marriage, but Soo-jin could see the concern in her eyes. "Promise me something," her grandmother said as dawn broke outside the window. "Promise me you'll be happy. Not just comfortable, not just safe, happy." Soo-jin nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise." When she returned to Seoul that afternoon, Min-ho was waiting. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. Min-ho stood in the penthouse lobby, his face a mask of controlled fury. Beside him was his head of security, a man whose presence made Soo-jin's stomach clench with fear. "Where have you been?" Min-ho asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Visiting my grandmother," Soo-jin replied, lifting her chin despite her trembling hands. "Without permission, without security, without informing me. I don't need permission to see my dying grandmother." The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her cheek burned, and she tasted blood where her teeth cut her lip. "You are my wife," Min-ho said, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "You don't go anywhere without my knowledge. You don't make decisions without my approval. You don't exist without my permission." The security guard looked uncomfortable, but didn't intervene. This was a domestic matter, and Min-ho paid his salary. "You're hurting me," Soo-jin whispered. "I'm teaching you," he corrected. "You seem to have forgotten your place." He dragged her to the elevator, his grip never loosening. In the penthouse, he threw her onto the couch like a discarded toy. "You embarrassed me today," he continued. My driver had to lie to cover for your disappearance. My security team had to track you down. Do you understand what that does to my reputation? Your reputation? Soo-jin stared at him in disbelief. My grandmother is dying, and you're worried about your reputation. Your grandmother is a means to an end, Min-ho said coldly. Just like you, I've invested considerable resources in keeping her alive, and I expect gratitude, not defiance. The words hit her like physical blows. Her grandmother's life, her own life, everything was just a business transaction to him. I want a divorce, she said quietly. Min-ho laughed, a sound devoid of humor. That's not possible. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You can't keep me here against my will. Can't I? He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was security footage of her taking money from the coffee shop's register, money she had never stolen. Theft from your former employer, he said casually. Very disappointing. Of course, the charges could be dropped if you remain a devoted wife. Soo-jin realized with growing horror that he had planned for this moment, prepared for her eventual rebellion. The cage wasn't just golden, it was locked. Chapter 10. The Unexpected Ally. Mrs. Choi had worked for Min-ho for 15 years, maintaining his penthouse with silent efficiency. She had seen him bring home other women before, models, actresses, socialites who lasted a few months before disappearing from his life. But Soo-jin was different. She was younger, more vulnerable, and clearly trapped in a way that made Mrs. Choi's maternal instincts stir uncomfortably. The morning after the confrontation, Mrs. Choi found Soo-jin sitting by the window, staring at nothing. Her cheek was still swollen, and there were finger-shaped bruises on her arm. Mrs. Park, she said softly, would you like some tea? Soo-jin nodded without looking away from the window. Choi brought the tea and sat down beside her, something she had never done before. My daughter is about your age, Mrs. Choi said quietly. She lives in Canada now, married to a good man who treats her well. Soo-jin finally looked at her, surprised by the personal revelation. I've worked for Mr. Park for many years, Mrs. Choi continued. I've seen how he treats his acquisitions. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. You're not the first young woman he's married, Mrs. Choi said, but you might be the last, if you're brave enough. What do you mean? Mrs. Choi glanced around nervously, then pulled out her phone. On the screen was a news article from 5 years ago. Business tycoon's wife dies in tragic accident. Soo-jin read the article with growing horror. Min-ho's first wife, barely 25, had died in a car crash after only 2 years of marriage. The article mentioned her troubled state of mind and recent erratic behavior. She tried to leave him too, Mrs. Choi whispered. The night before the accident, she called me. She was scared, said she had evidence of his illegal activities. She was going to the police. You think he killed her? I think powerful men don't let their possessions walk away. Mrs. Choi stood up, smoothing her apron. There's a storage unit in Hongdae, Unit 247. The key is taped under the kitchen sink. What's in it? Everything his first wife gathered before she died. Financial records, recordings, evidence of things that could destroy him. Mrs. Choi headed toward the door, then paused. Your grandmother called this morning. She's asking for you. The message was clear. Time was running out, in more ways than one. That night, while Min-ho attended a business dinner, Soo-jin found the key exactly where Mrs. Choi had said it would be. Chapter 11. The Evidence. The storage unit was small and dusty, filled with boxes that had been untouched for years. Soo-jin's hands trembled as she opened the first one, revealing files meticulously organized by Min-ho's first wife, Ji-young. The documents painted a picture of systematic corruption that went far beyond personal cruelty. Min-ho had been bribing government officials, manipulating stock prices, and using his charitable foundation to launder money. But more damning were the recordings Ji-young had made. Soo-jin plugged in an old laptop and listened to conversations that made her blood run cold. Min-ho discussing the disposal of business rivals, planning accidents that would eliminate threats to his empire, casually ordering violence like he was scheduling meetings. One recording was particularly chilling, a conversation between Min-ho and his security chief about Ji-young herself. She's becoming a problem, Min-ho's voice said through the laptop speakers. too curious, too independent. The marriage was a mistake. What do you want me to do? The security chief asked. Make it look like an accident. She's been unstable lately. Everyone knows that. A tragic case of a young woman who couldn't handle the pressure. Soo-jin covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Ji-young had been murdered, and now she was trapped in the same situation. But Ji-young had been smart. She had copies of everything: bank records, communication logs, video evidence of Min-ho's crimes. She had been building a case that could have destroyed him. At the bottom of the last box, Soo-jin found a letter addressed to "Whoever finds this. If you're reading this," Ji-young had written, "then I'm probably dead, and you're probably in danger too. Min-ho Park is a monster who hides behind wealth and respectability, but he's not invincible. The evidence in these boxes can destroy him, but only if it reaches the right people." The letter included contact information for a prosecutor who had been investigating Min-ho's activities, a journalist who specialized in corporate corruption, and a lawyer who worked with domestic violence victims. Soo-jin photographed everything with her phone, uploading the files to a secure cloud account. She had learned from Ji-young's mistake. Keeping everything in one place made it too easy to destroy. As she prepared to leave the storage unit, her phone buzzed with a text from Min-ho. "Where are you?" Her blood turned to ice. He was home early and she was supposed to be there waiting for him. She quickly locked the storage unit and rushed back to the penthouse, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. She had the evidence to destroy Min-ho, but she needed to be smart about how she used it. When she arrived home, Min-ho was waiting in the living room, his expression unreadable. "Traffic was terrible," she lied, hanging up her coat with hands that she hoped weren't shaking. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "Of course. Come here." As she walked toward him, Soo-jin realized that her real battle was just beginning. Chapter 12. The Final Gambit. 3 days later, Soo-jin received the call she had been dreading. Her grandmother had passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by nurses who said she had been asking for her granddaughter until the end. Min-ho's response was characteristically cold. "The funeral will be small," he decided. "We can't afford to look too emotional in public." But Soo-jin was past caring about his image. She had spent the last 3 days secretly meeting with the prosecutor and journalist from Ji-young's list, carefully laying the groundwork for Min-ho's downfall. The funeral was held on a gray morning in Busan. As they stood beside her grandmother's grave, Soo-jin felt a strange sense of peace. Her grandmother was free now, beyond Min-ho's reach, beyond anyone's control. "She lived a good life," Min-ho said, his arm around Soo-jin's shoulders in a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. "Yes," Soo-jin agreed. "She taught me that some things are worth fighting for." That evening, back in Seoul, Soo-jin made her move. While Min-ho was in his study, she activated the plan she had been preparing. The evidence went live simultaneously across multiple platforms. The prosecutor received files that would launch a criminal investigation. The journalist published an exposé that dominated the evening news. Social media exploded with recordings of Min-ho's voice discussing murder and corruption. Min-ho's empire began crumbling within hours. Stock prices plummeted, business partners distanced themselves, and law enforcement agencies launched coordinated raids on his properties. When he discovered what had happened, Min-ho's mask finally slipped completely. He stormed into their bedroom where Soo-jin was calmly packing her belongings. "You stupid girl!" he snarled. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've done what your first wife couldn't," Soo-jin replied without looking up. "I've destroyed you." "I'll kill you," he said, reaching for her. But the bedroom door opened and Prosecutor Kim entered with 2 police officers. "Park Min-ho," Prosecutor Kim announced. "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, fraud, and domestic violence." As they handcuffed him, Min-ho stared at Soo-jin with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," she said quietly. "You have no power over me anymore." 6 months later, Soo-jin stood in a small bakery in Paris, her dream finally realized. Min-ho was serving a life sentence, his assets frozen and distributed to his victims' families. She had testified at his trial, her voice steady as she described years of manipulation and abuse. The girl who had served coffee in Gangnam was gone, replaced by a woman who had learned that true strength came not from wealth or power, but from the courage to fight for what was right. She thought of her grandmother often, and of Ji Young, whose sacrifice had made justice possible. Their memory lived on in every life Soo-jin touched, every story she shared, every woman she helped escape from similar situations. Love, she had learned, wasn't about possession or control. It was about freedom, respect, and the choice to stay or go. And for the first time in her life, Soo-jin was truly free to choose. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, justice, and redemption. Please write in the comments which country you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of love, betrayal, and second chances.